This is Stories of Impact, the art and science of human flourishing. In every episode, we travel the world to explore intersections of science and spirituality. I'm your host, writer Tavia Gilbert, and along with journalist Richard Sergey, every first and third Tuesday, we look through a new lens at old traditions, hear from new generations as they dream up innovative solutions, and learn new ways to make sense of modern life. Over the last 5 years, we've explored stories with countless scientists whose thoughtful research reveals the way they're answering big questions and solving big problems. We've shared conversation about studies done in labs and out in the field. Well, today's field is Brazil. The labs are crowded city streets and verdant jungles. And the big question? What happens when you stop fearing and fighting against diversity and start exploring and embracing difference? The researchers we learn from today have found their answers through play, in music, drumming, dance, martial arts, food, ritual, shared experiences. We'll start with North American anthropologist Kurt Shaw, who found his meaning and purpose in the South.
Especially when you grow up in the academy, you get the sense that serious and important are synonyms. In Brazil, one comes to learn that playful and important are synonyms. And that shift in perspective is so tremendously important. All of my years studying Hebrew and Greek and Coptic, that seriousness actually brought me much less fulfillment and much less encounter with the other than play.
Shaw and anthropologist Rita da Silva are co-founders and co-executive directors of Usina da Imaginação, or Imagination Factory, a Brazilian nonprofit that focuses on empowering Brazilian marginalized communities and diverse childhoods. Da Silva is a native of Brazil and grew up steeped in the nation's rich, playful culture. In fact, the greatest virtue of Brazil, Da Silva might say, is play. Play is how Brazilians learn together, connect in community, and create meaning. Here's Da Silva.
We are all the time looking for the other person and call this person to play with us. And then playing outside, playing together, we open the house to people come and drink and play together and sing together. Also to compete, also to be alive, be playing, be joking, make music, and to change, to move, and also having a lot of party together. Because, it's not a party like we are going to have fun, but is moving people to make some stuff together.
Play is not only for fun, it's a creative, constructive path to survival. Da Silva says that vibrant play culture has helped Brazilian communities survive and thrive, despite a history of hardship.
But we are all the time playing some popular art in the street. Not only art, but culture is a way to show you are not the same of the other. You have something to offer, a way to connect. That's why I think art and culture also, it's so important to learn with the body, not only with your mind, and also to understand you are not alone in this world.
Da Silva points to the creative resistance and resilience of quilombos, communities formed by people of African origin who escaped from Brazil's colonial transatlantic slave trade.
And Brazil is also a huge country with many kinds of indigenous people, Black communities, quilombos, and they are amazing. They are, for a long time, living in very difficult situations. They are resisting. And if they are resisting, they are creating also the best way to show what they have to offer for the other.
Shaw gives other examples of how Brazilian creativity responded to the dehumanization of slavery.
A long history in Brazil of conflict being transformed into beauty. Conflict is transformed into aesthetics. So capoeira actually starts off as a martial art, which was used by enslaved peoples to dream about fighting back against the whites, then was used as a form of gang warfare, and then has gradually been transformed into a dance where people compete against each other in a dance. Samba is the same thing. Samba is different favelas that may have conflicts with each other, putting everything on the line to make the most beautiful costumes, the most amazing dance, the most amazing music in order to show that they are the best.
Brazil was the last country in the Americas to outlaw slavery in 1888, and the wounds left across the landscape and the psyche of the country remain today. Shaw explains,
Brazil has always been one of the most divided countries in the world. When we began to work in Recife, the city in the northeast of Brazil, it was the second most unequal city in the world after Luanda in Angola. But it's also a city in which the process of colonization and the way that Europeans came to Brazil established a very small European elite which imported slaves in absolutely terrible and destructive, world-destroying ways, and genocide of the indigenous people. So that history is reflected in the current construction of rich condominiums where people live a life which anyone in Europe or the United States would recognize in terms of the schools, the sort of electrodomestics that they have, streaming Spotify and Netflix. And then you have, on the other side, literally often right next to each other, but divided by a wall, favelas where people build their own houses, often out of cardboard, where settlement is very informal, where the state is only present as the police and not as any social services or electricity or sewer or any of those things. And so that's the history that we're working with. And at the same time that you have that in a physical way, the architecture of the country, it's also reflected in the way that people have learned to think, this division within our own minds and thinking that we only should talk to certain people.
And today, Brazilians face challenges that people worldwide are grappling with. Shaw says Brazilians
are running into something of a similar sort of increasing division between classes, between races, between gender, between people of different sexual orientations. All of those different things, Brazil's attempt to overcome that, its failures, its successes, that's an important lesson to the world.
Shaw and da Silva saw an opportunity for film to bridge social borders between children who lived in completely different worlds and help create an exchange of ideas. So they brought kids from the favelas or shanty towns together with kids who grew up affluent in condos just on the other side of the wall.
And so the kids from all walks of life, kids from the favela and kids from the upper middle class, Black kids and white kids, rural kids and urban kids, from Bahia and the north of Brazil, from here in the south, from the west, would come together and make movies together online. It was an amazingly powerful thing. They would create the stories, they would make the music for it, and so that was a really powerful way of developing empathy among kids across social borders.
Shaw and da Silva wanted to go more in depth with that work, and they recognized that a particular philosophy, especially held among Amazonian and Afro-Brazilians, made Brazil the perfect place to explore how bringing diverse people together might help heal polarization.
In Brazil, one of the great virtues that I think is not so reflected in the United States or Europe is to be together. Being together is one of the goals of life, and I think that's a really important way of thinking. Among Amazonian people particularly, though also among Afro-Brazilians, one of the ethical commandments is to be able to see the world through the eyes of the other, to feel the ground through the bare feet of the other, to taste food or sing the songs of the other. There is an ethic within indigenous and Afro-Brazilian culture that demands that encounter. And it's not necessarily listening or learning to someone. It's living their life. It is singing their songs. It is eating their food. It's a chance to learn. That diversity is a wealth, and that religious diversity, that cultural diversity is a wealth.
And embracing the perspective of diversity as wealth has created a full-body transformation for Shaw.
The American set of eyes is less important than the American set of feet, which is to say that my inability to dance a samba, my attempt to become a soccer player as good as the other 50-year-old soccer players that I play with, the need to walk on these amazing jungle paths around our house, that is much more important than the eyes because it makes me humble and it forces me to live in contact with this world that has so much to teach me. That to me is wonderful. That's why we often say in English, see the world through somebody else's eyes. That's important in Indigenous and Afro-Brazilian cultures, but you also want to feel it through their hands on the drum. You also want to feel it through the soles of their feet as you're walking on the jungle path, the broken streets of the favela. And so it's more than just eyes. And it's been so important for me to have that humility of understanding that smell and the touch of my feet, that's as important as anything else.
Both Shaw and Da Silva say they've been personally enriched by the unique culture of Brazil, particularly by what they've learned working with diverse children. Shaw says he learned more about the importance of creative play and embracing the other from one unforgettable teenage girl. Knots was the metaphor she used.
There are certain knots that we're all struggling with. And when somebody finds a solution to that in music, and I listen to that, suddenly their solution, their way of untying that knot or cutting that knot, jumps to me. And so for her, culture and music was like a synapse that goes from one brain to another. So there's a transcendence that happens with culture. It's not an encounter with the other, it is a sharing with the other. It is me and somebody untying a knot together when we hear that same chord, when we play that same rhythm on the zabumba. That, I think, was an immense insight. Such a smart girl who I think untied a knot, a philosophical knot that goes back through almost all the Western philosophical tradition. And she figured it out at 15 because she's a musician.
Shaw and Da Silva thought that was a powerful way to think about the construction of empathy and about overcoming bubbles in which we are living, where it's impossible to talk to people who are different from us. They have since looked to children of every age to be their teachers. They've worked with kids from 8 months old to 18 years old.
A baby is also communicating certain things about how important it is to be with other people. You just have to learn how to listen.
Da Silva agrees.
Kids normally, they open people's mind. When one child is born, we are not more the person we used to be. We need to change ourselves. As another person, you need also to learn how communicate, how relate with the kid. And it's the same process when the kid goes to the community or to the school. You need to learn to be in contact with more people. In this world, we are always very segregated, and the kids open the space to us. How we are in contact with other people and open your mind to the other. Most of the time, I'm listening and to see the movement, the way they sing. I feel like a baby, and being a baby is also being open to learn all the time and to experiment and to touch. And I think that's what I learn more. That position, how is important. I'm learning all the time. I'm open. I am experimenting life. I'm feeling like a baby, starting again and again. It's exhausting, but also very interesting because I am not stuck in thoughts. I'm moving, and I feel that's good for me, but good for people too, because they feel I'm valuing what they are doing. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to understand. I'm asking, and that's so nice.
So many Brazilian kids are born into great diversity and into a culture with space for tolerance and respect for others.
If you think about the history of Amazonian groups, they can be very different. You can have a Baniwa group on one side of the river and a Tucano group on the other side of the river that speak entirely different languages, that think about the world in different ways, have different mythical systems. These different groups are polarized. They don't see the world in the same way. They're very different from each other. But they see that difference as something that could make each one of them grow. There's a chance for learning. They don't want to exterminate the other. They don't want the other side to end, because they understand that other side has something to teach them. It's that dynamic that challenges, that they grow because they are in conflict, relationship, exchange with those people who are on the other side. It's an amazing way of thinking the way that one should relate to other people. It's a very different way than the way that Europeans have traditionally thought of the relationship with the other.
The Amazonian way of thinking could help people all across the world evolve and keep us from endlessly recreating the same wounds, says Shaw.
If we had an Amazonian way of thinking about it, it is somebody who has a different desire for a different gender. That's something really strange. What can I think about that? What does that teach me about desire? What does that have to teach me about how we can love each other? Somebody's trans. What does that teach me about what it means to have a connection between your body and your gender and your sexuality? There's something to be learned there. But if we have this idea that the other is to be exterminated, the one hates the other, and that the other shouldn't exist, that's the problem. It's really good that we're really different. It's really good that we're extremely different, that we're polarized in that ways. We don't want everybody to be just some boring mishmash in the middle. But the point is, we shouldn't hate each other. We shouldn't think that because somebody is different, they should be exterminated.
Da Silva adds,
People think in different culture, think in different way, and it's challenging for us, but it's so nice when you are open to connect and to learn and to value what people is doing and not trying to kill them like the colonization did.
Shaw and Da Silva's respect for the wisdom of babies, street kids, indigenous communities, and historically marginalized people sparked a research study about what the rest of the world could learn from how Brazilians think.
We're working with dozens of Afro-Brazilian and indigenous. We started off saying thinkers or intellectuals, but we really discovered that it's much more people who like to think. They don't necessarily have to be people in the university, they don't have to be people who are professional thinkers, but they're people who like to think, who can be kids, who can be musicians and artists, teachers. Let's value the knowledge of so many people who the academy, who the government, who knowledge generally doesn't listen to, but who think a lot and who like to think about it. And that, I think, is one of the biggest things that I'd like this project to bring to others, is to say it's not just university professors who think and are smart. Everybody's smart. You just got to figure out the way that they're smart and how we can learn from them. As we live in a polarized world, it's so hard to listen and to learn from each other. And so that's what we've been working on, is how it is that these perspectives, and we say perspectives literally because when a shaman enters in a trance, he's trying to see the world through the eyes of a jaguar or a harpy eagle. And so that's a perspective. How is it that these perspectives, of changing perspectives, makes it possible for us to see the world through the eyes of the other and therefore talk to each other and create communities that go beyond these bubbles that we live in. These encounters of rhythm, of food, of exchange, of dancing together, they bring more wealth to all of us. When you learn somebody else's rhythm, your rhythm becomes richer.
What did Shaw and Da Silva's project aim to uncover?
How people is trying to overcome separation, segregation, how we can feel you can talk with the other, the ways people find to be in contact, to be cultural involved with the other, more than only talking with the other, but talking with the body, talking with the sound, music.
Our working theory was that because of this cultural wealth and this idea of the ethical duty to see the world through the eyes of the other, which is so present in Brazil, that because of that, people who are involved in culture with the other would have really important insights about the way that one relates to the other. That hypothesis of the fact that there are loads of people thinking about otherness and why it's so hard to talk with other people, and when they've been successful, the insights that we've gotten from people involved in samba schools, indigenous leaders, children who do maracatu, which is a kind of Afro-Brazilian expression of music, all of these different things, it's really shown that's quite true, the amount of thinking that's been going on.
And what insights have they gotten?
Almost all of the things that we've heard from these different people who like to think in so many different circumstances is that the challenge in the contemporary world is that we aren't together enough. That the street is not a place where kids play anymore. That we don't have block parties like we used to. That there isn't that spontaneous exchange which made it possible to encounter people who are different than I am. And I think that Brazil has a big insight into that because of the walls that got built during the colonial period, during the military dictatorship. People understand how those walls get constructed. And at the same time, because of these amazing cultural phenomena like capoeira, like samba, like the dabukuri of the indigenous people, they also understand how to overcome it. If there's a universal theory that has emerged from this, is that one of the reasons for this polarized world that we live in is because people don't have spaces to play together.
Shaw and da Silva want to take their study of how Brazilians sing and dance, eat together, tell stories, and practice rituals, and develop a guide to be used by city planners, neighborhood associations, families.
Because of this question of being together, one of the big results of this project is going to be a manual, which is going to teach people how it is that you transform your street into a street where kids play again. How is it that you create a space where neighborhoods are neighborhoods and we're not so scared of people anymore, where we're not just stuck on our cell phones all the time? I personally think that manual will probably be one of the most impactful things that we do. We see it as a toolkit which can be useful to lots of different people who understand how important it is for the street to come alive again, especially for children, but also for adults.
The healing and connection that come from play at any age resonate with Shaw.
We generally in the United States talk about play with kids. In Brazil, all culture is play. In the same way that we play music in English, you also play capoeira, you also play samba, you also play theater. My sense is that the challenge of polarization, it comes a lot from that, from the lack of space, the way that our cities, the way that our mentality, the way that the internet has been constructed to make it difficult to play together.
Can what Shaw and da Silva have learned from their Brazilian-based study of healing polarization through diversity be useful to other communities, other countries?
The same basic premise of how is it that we can resuscitate this public life of being together in a world of modern technology. That's the challenge. But the basic steps, I don't think are that different if you're in India or Holland or Brazil or Colombia or even the United States.
Are Shaw and da Silva optimistic that their work can help bridge divides, reduce polarization, enhance human flourishing?
On the level of individual encounters, immensely optimistic. The moment that we have kids from different worlds coming together, adults from different worlds coming together, and looking each other in the eyes, sitting together, talking, eating food together, playing drums, playing with their kids. In that way, I'm really optimistic because I think that people want to learn from each other. But I think that the structures of communication that we're living with these days make that really difficult.
Da Silva says,
I'm studying also what I learned in the beginning of my life. I'm playing with this all in my mind and saying I can change some situation. I think being in the street with the kids, make movies with the kids, stay with the kids is what is positive in my life. And not only the position of being a mother, that's okay, is nice, is beautiful also, but trying to learn with the kids and trying to understand the kids. They are recreating everything like crazy because they touch everything, they move, they make a mess, they play the mud, and they are opening a lot of stuff for us and they are feeling with the body, growing, make synapses, and that's very positive for me. I am most of the time with people in the jungle and feeling that's the best way to live. Not being in the university all the time, fighting each other because you have the best paper, but being in the community and swimming and jumping and making your body alive. I'm not romanticizing indigenous life, but what I'm saying is it's so interesting to understand the diversity, the cultural diversity is nice, is good, and not the opposite.
I love this story so much. Bridging divides through creative expression, music, food, and community. If that doesn't lighten your spirits and give you some hope, I don't know what will. Thanks to Epidemic Sound and Sounds of the Earth and the Amazonic for the music for this week's episode. We hope you'll come back in 2 weeks for another new episode. In the meantime, please share the Stories of Impact podcast with someone you think would love it. And we'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch at storiesofimpact.org. This has been the Stories of Impact podcast with an interview by Richard Sergey. Written and produced by Tavia Gilbert for Talkbox Productions. Music by Alexander Filipiak. Mix and master by Kayla Elrod. Executive producer Michelle Cobb. The Stories of Impact podcast is generously supported by Templeton World Charity Foundation.